All right, now we have the pleasure of sitting down with Stu Heathcote. Stu is the president of live events at Rocket, overseeing music, experiential, film, and TV across the entire Rocket family of brands. He came to Rocket after 2 decades at AEG Presents, where he led global partnerships and helped launch the marketing campaign behind Taylor Swift's 1989 World Tour, including the Emmy-winning interactive experience. Billboard named him a brand power player multiple times. And before that, he led the marketing teams of the 49ers, the powerful sports brands, and now he's running the whole live events team here. So, Stu, thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
Your career is unbelievable. And just in talking before, you keep putting it to other people about how great they are, but this is all about you. I'm amazed at your involvement in live events. What got you in? What was your first gig?
I don't even know if it was a gig. I grew up as a basketball player, and I was very fortunate to get into UCLA for basketball.
Awesome.
And so I love sports, and that was it. I had a very difficult childhood, so my therapy was going by myself to a basketball court and shooting, and it progressed, and I got better and better. So it got me into the dream school I always wanted to get into. And then, along the way, you get hit with the tough moments, right? I got called into the office, said that we don't have a roster spot for you this season, those kind of things. So do you stay at your dream school, or do you transfer to a smaller school and play basketball, right? And so those are the things that, I had to articulate. I had a lot of good friends. I had a lot of good friends on the team. I had a lot of that stuff going for me. So I said, I'm going to stick this out. I've always wanted to be here, and I think it's going to open more doors for me. So I had an opportunity. My agent got me a gig in Switzerland. So I played for a professional team in Switzerland for 1 season. Didn't make much money, but I got to travel. I got a free place to live. I got to take the train to visit my friends from college. It was an amazing experience. And it really opened my mind up to how much I love travel and how much I love experiences in other places. And so I traveled down, took a train down to Spain, and I met the president of the Apparel division at Reebok. And this is going to date me a little bit, but we met at a payphone. He was calling home to check on family.
Wow.
And I was in line at the payphone, and I think I had a silly UCLA shirt on or something. So he said, "Oh, you're American. Like, what are you doing here? Blah, blah, blah." And so we ironically stayed in touch. After the season ended, I ended up writing him a letter. He remembered me. He got me an interview in the Orange County office, the sales office of Reebok at the time, with the regional head, Joe Harlow. She played basketball at Duke. We had a nice little connection, but she said, "For this job, you have no experience and you're absolutely not qualified." And I said, "Okay, great." And I said, "Well, if there's anything you think I'm qualified for as you move forward, let me know, because I'm very passionate about sports and being in this industry." About 6 months later, they said, "Hey, we have an entry-level position. We loved your passion. Would you want to come back and interview for it?" And so started on the ground level, learned the industry, was in customer service, working with some of the outside sales reps for, I would say, roughly a year, and got promoted into the team sports division. I opened some doors for them at UCLA through the marketing department in Boston, and we negotiated the UCLA sort of 300. It was one of the first 360 footwear and apparel deals.
Wow.
At UCLA. And so I got involved with dealing with them. I was doing athlete contracts in different leagues. And then how do we translate those negotiations and those deals into selling at retail, right? Because you're really doing marketing, so it translates into sales, right? And so it gave me a great mindset on the sales side and the marketing side. I think being in customer service, working with sales reps, and then working with athletes to understand the marketing side and how we needed those sort of anchors. And then from there, as Reebok started to lose market share, get more out of cleated and go back to more casual footwear, I loved the sports and performance side and was recruited by Adidas to join them. So Adidas basically came and said, "Hey, look, we're trying to get back," because Adidas went away for a while. You guys are all probably too young to remember that. And then it came back in the late 90s and early 2000s. And it was like, how do we get back entrenched in performance North America on-field sports? And so they had the idea that they would, work with the NFL. So that's when they called me and said, "Hey, would you be interested in helping us do licensing deals with the NFL and then work to get on-field?" And so we basically had 5 teams that we had. It was when the league split up their licensing. So you had Puma, you had Nike, and you had Adidas. and we had the Patriots and the Chargers and the 49ers. We were executing the launch of the Houston Texans, and we had the Buccaneers as well. So it was getting to work around those teams. As I worked closely with the 49ers and got to know their president, they were like, hey, would you ever consider coming to run marketing and business development for us? Immediately after I agreed to do that, they suspended the owner, and we had a whole transition. And it was a very different operating model from the new ownership to the former ownership, even though it remained in the same family. So it was really interesting for me to see how one owner looked at it and another owner looked at it. Honestly, like those tougher times are where you really get the education from. And so we went through kind of years of that. I was really desperate to get back to LA. I had an offer from the Dodgers. I had an offer from AEG. I chose to go with AEG because it was emerging. And the pitch from the old CEO was, we're going to acquire a lot of music businesses and a lot of music promoters, but I don't have the slightest clue how to monetize that. And I need your help to build that and run with the music division. And so I kind of became almost employee number one. So I was working on some sports projects there because obviously AEG owns the Kings and the Galaxy and teams in Europe and has a lot of entrenchment. They own a large percentage of the Lakers at the time. But it was really the thought of, okay, like we can take this like a stock and go up. So Golden Voice, Concerts West, Messina Touring Group, all these, all the big touring groups that are not Live Nation went under the AEG Presents umbrella, which was AEG Live at the time. And then it was up to us to figure out ways to grow the business and get people more comfortable with partnerships and broadcast deals, content, and all the things. So it was 20 years there. It was an amazing run. I got to work around some very legendary concert promoters, the Louis Messinas and the Paul Tillettes and the Paul Gongawares and the John Megalins and Larry Valens. And these are, and Jay Marciano, of course, who's currently the CEO. So it was really a great education. And I had to go in as an outsider because I was always in sports and really prove myself to say, I'm not necessarily a sports guy.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the music people back then, it was uncomfortable. It was like, putting on that uncomfortable leather jacket, right? You love it, but it doesn't quite fit.
Yeah.
And then over time, it fits perfectly and you want to wear it every day. And so once they got comfortable with my personality and the way I looked at things and the way we approach things in a really thoughtful way, an intentional way, as opposed to a transactional way, we knew we could build things together. And so we had a lot of success on like the Taylor Swift campaigns, obviously Paul Tillet's, Bill Fold, legends, how they built Coachella, get to have a front row seat and work with them on that. And so a lot of really, really unique properties. I mean, there were hundreds of them around the world. And so it was a great time to be alive, as they say.
Well, and I mean, you being a pioneer in all of this, a theme that I was hearing in this whole story is that you just kept putting yourself out there and people were noticing. You weren't begging for anything. Like the opportunities were coming to you. So it's telling me that you were proving yourself in whatever role you took on, because what did you really know about partnerships when you started with Reebok? And then you learned that, and then you had to go into doing that with Adidas in a whole new world with NFL. How did you learn that, and how did you know that you could become the expert in that?
Look, I think it's a lot, like learning is, you have to be passionate about learning, right? I mean, in all of it, right? And every day is learning. I think kids in college, when I hear them, they're like, well, I just want to get a job so I can get on with my life. Well, every day you're doing homework, and every day you're reading, and every day you're learning about the industry, and every day you're learning about the people you work around, and you're learning about all sorts of different things, right? And so the learning never stops. And if you're humble in that and you read and you stay up on things, it's going to kind of give you a little bit of a head start or whatnot. I think my approach has always been, treat the security guard, treat any worker, any security guard at a venue, anybody the same, whether it's a legend like a Paul Tillett or whether it's someone that you're walking by and you see going into the office every day that has to check your badge. And if you can treat everybody really respectfully and try to brighten up their day just a little bit, I believe that brings in a great culture. And when you have great culture, that's what really is a driving force. And I think there's challenges within that, right? But if it's not for them, it's not for them. It's like we always said back in the day, look, if it's impossible, just say no. If it's difficult, let's give it a try. And so you take the impossible and you move on. But if it's hard, that's kind of the fun part, because the hard is the challenge, and then the challenge is the journey, and the journey is usually the fun part of the end.
Boom. Something that you really enjoyed bringing to AEG was the relationship instead of the transactional. And I can imagine, did you learn that in brand partnerships through with NFL, with all these different apparel companies? Partnerships require just relationship, which then can make you a lot of money. How did you bring that into AEG?
Early on in Coachella, when maybe the festival wasn't as well known or struggling, as we had an offer on a new music product. I don't want to mention the brand. It's a massive brand, but they were not entrenched in music, and their credibility in music maybe wasn't where it should have been at that time. And so we got offered a crazy amount of money for the festival to be able to launch this product. And so I sat down with the creator of Coachella, Paul Tollett, and I said, look, this is enormous money. This can catapult us. This is it. And he said, listen, it may help us financially, but this product won't be around in a year or two. And I don't want to align this festival and this brand with something that won't be here in 2 years, because it will damage the brand. It will damage the credibility of the brand.
Wow.
And so we passed on a big check. And, you know, there's partners, there's financial partners, there's things that put a lot of weight on that and a lot of pressure on that. But that was another moment and another nugget of, you don't need to be transactional. Yes, you need to pick up business. Yes, you need to sell deals. Yes, you need to go after these leagues and all the things. But at the end of the day, the transactional piece of it is maybe not as powerful as looking at the long-term journey and the long-term vision of it. So those were a couple examples of good lessons I learned along the way.
Let's just look at what Coachella is now. I mean, I know it as obviously a great music festival. It's one of the top destinations to go, but also it is brand activation central. And it's what so many other festivals are now trying to emulate. And so it's, let's get into Rocket. What brought you from AEG to Rocket?
I got a call from an old friend that was on the private equity side, and he was a part of the team that purchased Rocket many, many years ago. And when they were doing their due diligence, he called me. He's an amazing human being. His name's Bill Linehan. He was, how do I describe this guy? Just in case I get this soundbite, I have to send it to him. But he's a North Star, right? So we went to UCLA together, dear friends, All-American water polo player, Rhodes Scholar candidate at UCLA, modeled on the side, went to Wharton Business School, lived in New York as a banker, hardest working guy you'll ever meet, one of the smartest human beings you ever meet. And I introduced him to his wife, so I take credit for that. They have 2 amazing kids. But he was part of the team that was doing due diligence on Rocket, and he called me and said, hey, you're sitting in the epicenter of music in LA. I'm trying to learn more about the music business. I'm looking at buying this company, Rocket Cargo. Is there any expertise you can give me on how tours are routed, how the infrastructure of touring works globally, all that stuff? So I said, hey, why don't you come down, spend a week in the office. I'm going to introduce you to some touring legends and see if you can pick up any nuggets of information around them that'll be helpful in the transaction. And so he came in and did that. And fast forward probably 10, 12 years later, he called me and he said, hey, I was running down to get a coffee, and I ran into a board member at Rocket who's currently was owned by a company, ATL.
Mm-hmm.
And that board member said, yeah, we have a great board. It's a lot of folks that are on the logistics side or the freight forwarding side, but we don't really have anybody that understands commercial on the board. And Bill said, well, I have a really good friend that is an executive on the commercial side at AEG. You should pick his brain. And he's built a lot of commercial organizations along the way. And so ended up talking to the gentleman. Then COVID hit. I did a couple Zoom calls with the CEO at the time, and they reached out and asked me to join the board. So obviously I went back to AEG and said, is this even okay? And they said, yeah, it's a non-compete. It'll be good experience. So I went and did it. And then during that journey, we made the decision that we needed to hire a new chairman. And so there's a gentleman that's our chairman now, Dan Rosenthal.
Yep.
So we went through the interview process. Myself and the head of the board were very involved in that. And Dan is a North Star. He's one of those visionaries. He is nothing can defeat me. Positivity, energy bus lifestyle. you can't help but just want to run through a wall for this guy.
Wow.
And the rest of the team I know feels the same way. And so he trusted me enough to invite me into the room to sell the business at the time. I think it really is a good example of, John Wooden had this old saying, right? Just as a UCLA basketball knucklehead,
Yeah.
I'll say it, but it was like, it's what you learn after you know it all that matters.
Ugh.
And so you go into these things thinking, oh, well, I've done all these great things in the industry and blah, blah, blah. And so it really humbles you. You're in front of bankers. You're in front of people they're far smarter than me. Dan's far smarter than me. It's just you're listening and you're learning, and every question, there's a reason behind it. Dan really said you have to listen to the question and understand why the question's being asked, what the motivation is, what was asked before that question to take you to that question, and what do you think is going to be asked after that question. And so he really had this knowledge of how these guys think, and it was an incredible learning experience for a long period of time. So I was really blessed to be able to go through that. It was a big reason why I wanted to come on board. I miss my dear friends where I worked for 20 years, and a lot of them, we talk all the time.
Yeah.
Because I learned so much from each one of them in different ways. So much respect for that. And, a lot of respect for the lessons that Dan taught me along the way since joining.
Wow. Since joining, how many years ago?
Well, the board, I was on for 2 years, and then I've been in this operator role for 2 years.
What have you felt like is the biggest transition for you?
I think going through the sale process was obviously very crazy. A lot of months in New York, right? Yeah. Just trying to understand, what pushes the buttons of the people, right? Because you really want to build culture. You want to have everybody rowing the boat in the same direction.
Got it.
And when you acquire a lot of new businesses and you bring new businesses on board, and people might have had a lot of passion for those businesses they were in before they were purchased, you have to figure out a way to bring everybody together. And that doesn't just mean personalities or culture. It means integration. It means brand integration. It means a lot of different things.
So how did the FIFA relationship come to be?
I was on the board at the time, and Dan said, hey, why don't you come with me? And a gentleman by the name of Brent Nagy, who's also an incredible commercial agent. He leads our mega event strategy. He leads how do we get into these bigger things, and he is super nice. He's built this amazing relationship with FIFA. Really give him a ton of credit for that, and Dan as well, because these relationships are difficult, right? And they become your family, and sometimes family gets difficult, right? There's wants and needs and all those things. So we went back to Zurich and started the conversation. They didn't really know much about us, but it gave me a chance to see someone like Dan and someone like Brent and the head of our board, Andy Clark, be in a room and talk about the business and present. I happen to know the commercial person from my past life in the commercial side, Nick Brown. And those guys have really led this thing and done such an amazing job. Now it's about execution.
Yeah.
The teams are built. You have great leadership in Ed Reno that Darren has really pushed people out into roles that they're going to succeed in. He's done an amazing job of identifying that. I think Ed Reno has done the same thing. We have Brandon Bowles. We have Nick Kashparik. We have a great team of people that are ready to lead and get through this event. It's the biggest event in the world. There'll be a lot of challenges, but we have the right team to pull it off.
In world history.
That's
ever been put on.
Yeah.
It's a pretty big task.
It's a tiny little thing.
That y'all's motto is that failure is not an option. And so for the biggest sporting event in world history, there's a lot of pressure that goes into that. Yeah. So you have to have the right teams in place. For your role in particular, I love that you were talking about with culture and making sure that everyone is pushing towards the same goal. What is that in your mind for FIFA, in particular, the World Cup, while the rest of Rocket's business is still moving?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, right? And we move what moves you. And certainly FIFA and the World Cup move a lot of people emotionally. Yeah. And so we're excited to see that play out. I think from the standpoint of how do we look at that business, right? So we have to deliver.
Yeah.
Critically, the most important thing is delivering for FIFA and creating the best event with FIFA that we can, getting things to the right place, making sure the venues are all executing. We have a control tower approach where the information goes and gets distributed to the different places they need to be distributed
Got it.
to. But I think there's two other circles involved in this. One is all the broadcasters, right? All those needs that they have. Now, we may not have 100% of that business, but we have a really good portion of that business. And I think what that can do is then take it into the next mega event where we continue to work with those broadcasters, right? And so when you look at the third circle of it, it is experiential and all of the other things. So yes, FIFA is a moment in time. There will be more World Cup, Women's World Cup in Brazil, but that's a little more centralized, right? So not as much movement across 3 countries, 16 cities. But what happens is you're then now have relationships with the broadcasters. You have relationships with those brands, those agencies, those experiential folks that are critical as you go forward. Because look, experiential is trade shows and conventions and sporting events and music events and festivals especially, and so many other things, right? And so how do we take that business, have the right analytics on how we look at going after the TAM and making it global, and then building these relationships with the agencies and brands and obviously the other trade shows and conventions that we spoke about. So
It's huge.
So it's huge. So we have to get this right.
Yeah.
Again, failure is not an option. And I believe we have the right team to do it.
Talk to me a bit more about these experiential. It's more than just the event itself. It's the branded activations and the experiential components that you guys have to move. Can you talk about what some of those could be that have been in the past or what they're going to be with the World Cup?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's the low-hanging fruit is kind of the world I come from, right?
Yeah.
And so if you go back to a Coachella or a Stagecoach or some of these other 40 festivals we had oversight to at AEG, all of those brands are what helps pay for not only the event, but the artists, bookings, and all the things, right? So you have to have the brand's involvement in all of these events, whether it's music, whether it's sports, whatever it might be. I mean, you have now wellness exhibitions and you have, museum exhibit. You have all these kind of things, right, that need to go from one place to the other.
Yeah.
So, you might have an American Express that's at Electric Forest in the middle of nowhere. Work with Momentum, who's our agency, and you get the Amex activations and you get them to Electric Forest. So that's just one of thousands of these opportunities.
Especially now that everything is, the value of having those in-person events, around events, is everywhere. Everyone's doing it now.
Everywhere.
Every brand has to do it.
And I think the crossover between sports and music, right? When has FIFA ever done halftime shows at the capacity they're doing them now, right? I mean, Katie, who we've done her tour for many, many years. We did her tour when I was at AEG.
Yes.
We do her tour here at Rocket. Justin Carbone, you met earlier, is involved in that. Etzel's involved in that. And she'll be performing at the LA opener for the U.S.-Paraguay match. So these things have connectivity. We have to get in and make sure that we're making sure that connectivity turns into business, making sure that we're driving the relationships, making sure we're pushing the commercial forward. And that, that's going to be the key to our success going forward. But again, it's about the people. It always comes back to the people. And when you talk about Darren Brown and you talk about these team of leaders that we have, you talk about Fritz on the art and car side, incredible leaders but incredible human beings that are just really passionate about what they do. And I might have a fun history, but the things I've already learned from Darren Brown are incredible and next level. Angus, who runs our marketing, I learn from him every day. Yeah. So there's just, that's where the important stuff comes. That's where the secret sauce comes in the people. And this is an asset-light business with people that have been here for decades. And they are people that really care about success and getting things to the next place. Sometimes those emotions can be high because there's a lot of pressure on delivery. Yep. And so we just want to make sure that we're providing the best environment for them to work, the best environment for them to perform, and, all things move forward.
And it's very apparent, obviously, in how much you guys dominate touring and music where I come from and where a lot of our listeners come from, but to see the expansion of this, just showing the world what you can handle while still handling pretty much every major tour ever. So
that, and it's such a good point because we may have a significant amount of market share in global touring, but we want more. So if you look back on festivals in general, right? Festivals were culturally a European feel, right? And you look at Glastonbury and some of the other big festivals, no one really thought it could work in the States. until Paul Tollett had this vision. But what's happened is, when music and brands were not culturally appropriate, when everybody wanted to be indie, I'm not selling out, all those things. Well, now it's quite the opposite, right? I mean, you see brand activations almost as big as some of the headliners. You also see headliners showing up at the brand booths. Like an example at American Express, who has a relationship with an Olivia Rodrigo. She's going to show up at that Amex activation because Amex might be a tour partner that's offering access to that tour. So the brand and the music infrastructure are becoming closer and closer. And that didn't happen 10 to 15 years ago. And so when you really pull it back, it's like, how do we figure out ways to get more entrenched in experiential because of what's happening in the music business and what's obviously been happening in sports, but more so in music now because all those music artists want to be aligned with these different companies that can elevate and expand their platform. And so, it's about aligning with the right brand, but that right brand wants to travel.
Wow.
And that's where we come in. And so whether they're hitting 6 festivals in the festival season or 20 festivals, we've got to get those activations site to site, and we got to move them the right way, and we got to get them in, and we got to get them activated and set up so that they can perform for the fans, because truly the brands are performing for the patrons now as well.
And if you're going to build an incredible experiential setup, why use it just one time? Move it around, do it a bunch.
Yeah.
Use Rocket for that.
Yeah.
I could talk to you for hours, but this was fascinating. Thank you for sharing your career. We're all very excited to see what you guys do.
Thank you so much.
Especially with this World Cup. It's awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you to Rocket for giving us an inside look into the operations, logistics, and people that make the world's largest events happen. So, when y'all are watching the FIFA World Cup this summer, just know that Rocket got everything to all 16 stadiums. Thanks y'all so much for watching, and go USA!